Hello friends, today we are going to study about two important diseases of recent concern which include monkeypox and the Chandipura virus. Monkeypox has been recently declared as a public health emergency of international concern by the WHO. In this video, we are going to first study about monkeypox, about the different symptoms of monkeypox, the causes of monkeypox, the measures to prevent monkeypox, whether any antivirals or drugs are available or whether any vaccines are available, etc. Then we will study about Chandipura virus, about the different symptoms, the causes, the measures to prevent the virus, etc. And we will also study the difference between endemic, pandemic and epidemic. Then we will study the concept of what is a pandemic treaty and also about the 77th World Health Assembly which took place recently. Now we start our discussion with what is monkeypox. Monkeypox has been designated as a public health emergency of international concern. Now it is a zoonotic disease, that is, it originates in animals. It initially spreads from animal to animal, then from animal to human, and finally from human to human. WHO has placed it on stage 3 of the global emergency framework, which means that this disease, monkeypox, has the potential to mutate further and turn into a deadly pandemic, potentially affecting multiple countries and posing a significant global threat. Means that it is not already a pandemic. It has not already transformed into a pandemic, but if adequate measures are not taken, then it can transform into a pandemic. Now, what are the regions where the outbreak has occurred? Firstly, in 2022, the outbreak was seen, and at present, the outbreak has again been seen in 100 plus countries. In Africa, the outbreak is in Central Africa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Eastern and Western Africa are also reporting the outbreak. Outside Africa, in Europe, cases have been reported in Sweden. Then, in the Americas, cases have been reported in North, Central, and South America. And also in Asia, in Pakistan, a case has been reported in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Now, as we have already seen in 2022, monkeypox was already listed as public health emergency of international concern, but following some containment measures, it had been removed from this list by WHO. So since countries took some containment measures, monkeypox was removed from the list of public health emergency of international concern. Now the new outbreaks are a fresh concern because with further mutation, monkeypox could spread more easily. Now, how does this disease spread? It spreads mainly through physical contact and contact with the fluids, the bodily fluids of the person. In monkeypox, lesions they appear on the body, and also blisters appear. And when fluid comes out of these blisters, and if any person comes in contact with these fluids, then the disease spreads. Now it is said that with certain mutations, the virus could become airborne also. At present, it is not airborne. But if certain mutations occur, then it may become airborne. And this is a very threatening situation because if the virus becomes airborne, it will spread much more easily. And right now, the outbreak is largely contained because it spreads only through contact with the contaminated fluids of the affected person. Now, WHO has put monkeypox on alert. Does this mean that we need to panic? Answer is no, because at present it has not become a pandemic and it spreads through physical contact. And although there is a threat that on mutation it can become airborne, and it means that countries they need to make efforts. Countries need to make global efforts to track, monitor, and contain the spread of the virus so that it does not become a pandemic in future. So the virus, in order to prevent it from becoming a pandemic in future, countries need to track, monitor, and contain the spread of the virus. And also countries need to coordinate and share the data to set up epidemiological surveillance and monitoring to detect the cases of the disease and to increase the testing. And if any patients are identified, they should be quarantined. And also contact tracing should be carried out. All those people with whom they have come in contact, they should also be isolated. So this was about the efforts that countries need to make in order to prevent this virus from in order to prevent this monkeypox disease from becoming a pandemic. So since WHO has declared it as a public health emergency of international concern, the countries need to take these measures: tracking, monitoring, containing the spread to prevent it from becoming a pandemic, coordinating data sharing, surveillance, monitoring and quarantining patients, increasing testing, etc. Now we move on to further information about this disease. How is it transmitted? We have already seen it is transmitted through physical contact with the infected person, direct touch, bodily fluids. Who are the most vulnerable to this disease? So those people who come in contact with animals, those working closely with infected animals, those who work at slaughterhouses, who consume wild game meat, and those people who work with wild animals and carcasses. So these people are most vulnerable since it is a zoonotic disease. There are two different lineages of the virus. The two different lineages, they are clade 1 and clade 2. Now clade 2 is a mild variant, and it was this clade 2 variant which had spread in 2022, and it had spread mainly in West Africa. Clade 1 virus, which is spreading currently in 100 plus countries, it is a deadlier variant. It is spreading in Central and Eastern Africa. Also on mutation, the clade 1 can transform into clade 1b, and the virus can cause death in 4% of the cases. So death can be caused in 4% of the cases. Currently, there are no antiviral drugs for monkeypox. Now, which are the animals which act as carriers of monkeypox? These are monkeys and squirrels. So since monkeys act as carriers, it is called as monkeypox. What are the symptoms? In most cases, the symptoms are mild, and there are deadly rashes on the body which turn into lesions, and eventually they turn into a blister which is filled with liquid, that is pus, and it is often very painful and itchy. What are the other symptoms? These include fever, headache, sore throat, fatigue, extremely low energy levels, swollen lymph nodes. Now, the symptoms of monkeypox, they start to appear in 1 to 21 days of time, and the symptoms, they can last up to 2 to 4 weeks. Now, in most cases, the disease is tackled by the immune system on its own, and it goes away on its own, but in some cases it can progress to very dangerous conditions. As we saw that clade 1 and clade 1b, they are deadlier variants, and in 4% of the cases, even death can be caused. So it can progress to very dangerous conditions in some cases, and more vulnerable population include children, pregnant women, senior citizens, and those who have other comorbidities, that is other diseases like heart disease, etc. So they are more susceptible because their immune system is already weak, they are more vulnerable. And those people who are immunocompromised, they are more susceptible to the disease. So there is no drug or antiviral in at present for monkeypox. So what is the treatment then? So the treatment mostly includes palliative care, supportive care. So that is, palliative care means treating the symptoms. Since we can't do anything, we don't have the specific drug or antiviral. So all we can do is treat the symptoms. So how are the symptoms treated? By means of pain management. So give certain medication to reduce the pain, fever management with palliative care. So that is the line of treatment advised by WHO. So the treatment is symptomatic in nature, it is supportive and palliative care. Now in certain cases, that is in exceptional circumstances, antivirals like tecovirimat, which is used to treat smallpox. So these antivirals like tecovirimat, which is used to treat smallpox, it can be used for monkeypox as well. So since it is the same family, the virus belongs to the same family as smallpox and cowpox. So the antivirals which are used to treat smallpox, they can be used in case of monkeypox as well in exceptional circumstances. So the use is only in exceptional circumstances, and it has been approved by European Medicines Agency. Then about the vaccines that have been developed against this disease. So the first vaccine, which is the most common vaccine developed against monkeypox, it is the Bavarian Nordics 2-dose vaccine. So it is the Bavarian Nordics 2-dose vaccine. and it has been authorized for use against monkeypox. Now the other vaccines, there is a vaccine called ACAM 2000, and this is a vaccine used for smallpox. We know that smallpox has already been eradicated, and in India it was eradicated in the year 1980. So this, although smallpox has been eradicated, but the vaccine is still there. Countries still stockpile the vaccine because they know that in case a reoccurrence of this disease, that is smallpox, occurs, then they will need the vaccines. So the vaccines for smallpox which have been stockpiled, like the ACAM 2000 vaccine, this ACAM 2000 vaccine, it can be used against monkeypox also. It can be used as a cross shot which works for monkeypox also. Then other vaccine developed against smallpox like the MVA-BN, the LC11, and the orthopox vaccine, they are also approved for the prevention of monkeypox. Now these vaccines, they have to be used only for the most vulnerable groups. WHO does not recommend mass vaccination against monkeypox. Why? Because the vaccine used for smallpox, it may not be 100% effective against monkeypox. So the most vulnerable groups, they should be prioritized. Now what about India? So at present no monkeypox cases are there in India, but still we need to be on alert, and we need to take stock. The Ministry of Health, it has recently taken stock of the situation, and we need to increase testing and ensure greater level of surveillance, because foreign tourists coming to India, they can easily spread the virus. So we need to increase surveillance at the ports of entry like the airports, seaports, land border crossing points, etc. Now we just studied that monkeypox is a public health emergency of international concern, and in order to prevent it from becoming a pandemic, a lot of steps need to be taken. Now we will go briefly into the concept of endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. So what is endemic? So endemic means the constant presence of a disease, constant presence or usual prevalence of a disease or an infectious agent in a population within a particular geographical area. So if a disease is usually found in a particular area for a very long time, usually it is found and people are usually affected by the disease, then it is called an endemic disease. For example, we can say that it is also said that sickle cell anemia, it is endemic to certain African countries. So endemic, I will again summarize it. Endemics are endemic disease means the constant presence of a disease in a particular population, constant presence of an infectious agent in a particular population within a particular geographical area. So that disease is usually prevalent. Usual prevalence and constant presence of a disease in a particular population and within a particular area. So this is endemic. Now what is epidemic? So epidemic, according to WHO, it is the regional outbreak of an illness that spreads unexpectedly. So it is the outbreak of an illness, regional outbreak of an illness that spreads unexpectedly. For example, we can talk about the plague outbreak in India many years ago. So this was an epidemic. So when a disease, it spreads unexpectedly in a particular area, and then it is called as an epidemic. So this is what is epidemic. Then we come to the concept of pandemic. For example, in Wuhan, the COVID-19 disease which spread unexpectedly in Wuhan. Initially it spread only in the Wuhan region of China, and it spread unexpectedly in a particular region, that is Wuhan, so it became an epidemic. Then the plague outbreak in Surat in India, it was also an epidemic. So regional outbreak of an illness that spreads unexpectedly is an epidemic. Now, what is pandemic? So, pandemic can be called an epidemic which spreads over a large number of countries. It crosses international boundaries and it covers almost the whole of the world in lot of regions of the world. So, that is pandemic. So, when an epidemic it spreads to multiple countries, when epidemic spreads to multiple countries or regions of the world, then it is called as pandemic. So it is across the globe. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic. So now we have understood the difference between endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. Now we will come to a concept of what is pandemic treaty. At present, there are global efforts to frame a pandemic treaty after the recent COVID-19 outbreak that took place in the year 2020 and 21. So there was a lot of loss, and the world is thinking of having a pandemic treaty because during the COVID-19 it was alleged that China did not share information about the outbreak, and not sharing of information by China it led to further spread of the COVID-19 in other countries. So if countries have a data sharing mechanism, if they coordinate with each other, then such outbreaks can be prevented or they can be nipped in the bud. So for this a pandemic treaty is required. But it is a sad fact that in the recent 77th World Health Assembly, a pandemic treaty could not be completed because the countries they were not able to reach a consensus on this issue. Now we will briefly talk about what is a pandemic treaty and about the 77th World Health Assembly. Now, what is a pandemic treaty? It is an international treaty designed to fortify the global pandemic preparedness and implement mechanisms for preventing the same. So, it is a treaty for pandemic preparedness. So, pandemic treaty, it is a treaty for pandemic preparedness, and it is to reduce the inequities that, like in the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw that many of the African countries they could not get the vaccines. Only the rich nations they cornered the vaccines, and the African countries, substantial populations, they remained deprived of the vaccine. And this caused significant losses. And pandemic treaty, what aspects does it cover? So it covers data sharing and genome sequencing of the emerging virus. Then equitable distribution of the vaccines and drugs. Also related research throughout the world, and it helps in combating the pandemics, in preventing future pandemics. And now we are going to study about the recent session of the 77th World Health Assembly that took place. Now, what are the major agreements that were reached at this 77th World Health Assembly? So the first thing is that it was the World Health Assembly, the 77th World Health Assembly, it agreed on a package of amendments to the International Health Regulations 2005. So there were International Health Regulations 2005 and amendments to these International Health Regulation 2005 were agreed to. And there were around 300 proposals for reform by governments of both the global north and the south, and they were negotiated for up to 2 years. So these negotiations took place for 2 years, and finally they agreed to certain amendments to the International Health Regulations 2005. Now, what were these amendments? These amendments they aim to increase the ability of the countries to prepare for and respond to public health emergency of international concern. And they introduced a new category for urgent international response. One is first point we studied is that these amendments they are aiming to increase the ability of countries prepare to prepare for and to respond to public health emergency of international concern. Then one important thing is that they have added a new category for urgent international response. So a new category for urgent international response added by them is the pandemic emergency. So this new category has been added, pandemic emergency. So this is a new category for urgent international response. Then these amendments, they aim to ensure equitable access to health products during the health emergency. So equitable access should be there. So all countries, they should get vaccines and medicines equitably. And to mobilize financial resources. So to mobilize financial resources for supporting developing countries in building and maintaining of core health systems. So developing countries, they should be supported to build core health systems like hospitals, etc., and also health capacities required under the international health regulations. Then amendments, they emphasize solidarity and equity while maintaining the creation of a national international health regulation authority for better coordination. So they aim at creation of a national international health regulation authority. So countries, they should have their national international health regulation authority for better coordination. And this will help in promoting equity in healthcare. Then one important thing is the transfer of technology. So strong provisions for technology transfer and local population, they are required. So technology transfer, strong provisions are required because at present in the pandemic treaty, as we know, it could not be completed. It could not be properly negotiated. Why? Because there were certain disagreements. What were the disagreements about? One was the disagreement regarding the pathogen access and benefit sharing system, PABS. This was included in the Article 10 of the proposed pandemic treaty. Pathogen access and benefit sharing. That is, if any pathogen is found in a country and it is spreading, then the country needs to share information about the pathogen with other countries. So on this, an agreement could not be reached between the different countries. So since this pathogen access and benefit sharing, it could not be, no agreement could be reached, no final agreement could be reached on this. So how to compensate for this? To compensate, there should be technology transfer from the developed to the developing countries. Now one more thing about this pathogen access and benefit sharing. There is a monetary obligation whereby 10% of the vaccines and antivirals would be provided to WHO at affordable prices during the pandemic. So this was the main provision of this PABS, which could not be agreed upon by the country. So what was this main provision? It was that suppose a disease is breaking out, suppose in China again, and China has suppose developed vaccines and antivirals for it. Now China has to supply 10% of these vaccines and antivirals to WHO at affordable rates. In case a pathogen is found in China and the disease is spreading in China, then 10% of the vaccines and antivirals have to be supplied by this China to WHO at affordable rates. So this could not be agreed upon by the country, this pathogen access and benefit sharing. And there was a disagreement on this. So what is the suggestion? Suggestion is that there should be provisions for technology transfer and local production. Local production within the countries, it should be encouraged, and there should be technology transfer. Now there are certain WTO agreements under the trade-related intellectual property rights, WTO agreements under the TRIPS. Now what are these WTO agreements? These include the compulsory licensing provision. In India we have WTO agreement is TRIPS, and there is a provision called compulsory licensing in India. So what is compulsory licensing? Suppose there is a patented drug, and that patented drug is costing suppose 3 lakh rupees. Now this is unaffordable to the common man. So suppose another company, it will manufacture the same drug it will manufacture the generic version of the drug. Government will give that company, that other company, permission to manufacture the generic version of this drug and sell it for a lower price. So this is known as granting of compulsory licensing, and this can make that patented medicine affordable to the common population, to the general population of the country. So such provisions like compulsory licensing, they should be encouraged. So this was about some of the provisions agreed to at the World Health Assembly, the 77th World Health Assembly that was held recently. So I just briefly summarize the provisions. One was the provision of it was a pandemic emergency. So a new concept of pandemic emergency, it was introduced, a new category for urgent international response, that is pandemic emergency. This new category, it was introduced. Then this treaty, these agreements, the amendments to the International Health Regulations 2005, what do they aim at? They aim at increasing the ability of the countries to prepare for a public health emergency of international concern, to mobilize funding and resources for supporting the developing countries in maintaining the core health system capacities required under international health regulations, and also ensuring equitable access to vaccines and medicines. Now, agreement regarding PABS, it could not be reached, that is pathogen access and benefit sharing. So this agreement could not be reached. And what does this agreement, what did this PABS say? It said that 10% of the vaccines and antivirals, they need to be shared. They need to be shared with WHO at affordable prices during the pandemic. This is what this PABS provision included in the Article 10 of the draft pandemic treaty, it said. So in the draft pandemic treaty, there was an Article 10 which said that there is a monetary obligation on the countries to supply 10% of the vaccines and antivirals at affordable rates to WHO. And no agreement could be reached on this, no consensus could be reached. So it has been proposed that there should be technology transfer and local production in order to enhance capacities of the countries to cope with the pandemic. Now, we have studied about monkeypox, about the difference between endemic, epidemic, and pandemic, about the concept of a pandemic treaty, and about the 77th World Health Assembly. Now we will move on to the next disease, that is the Chandipura virus. This is an outbreak in India, recently in Gujarat and some parts of the neighboring states of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. Cases of this Chandipura virus have been recorded. Now, what is this virus? It is a member of the vesiculovirus genus of the family Rhabdoviridae. And this family Rhabdoviridae, it also includes the rabies virus. Now this virus, it was first isolated in the year 1965 from the blood of two adults with a febrile illness. Febrile means having fever. In Chandipura village in Nagpur, Maharashtra. So in Nagpur, Maharashtra, there is the Chandipura village, and here two adults had illness with fever, and from the blood of these two individuals, the virus was first isolated in the year 1965. Then other instance when this virus was isolated was in 1980 in Madhya Pradesh. Now how is this virus transmitted? It is a vector-borne disease. And what is the vector? Vector means carrier. So what is the carrier? Carrier or the vector is female phlebotomy sandfly. So sandfly acts as the carrier of this virus. And these sandflies, they are insects prevalent in the early monsoon period, and they are normally found in the crevices of the walls. Now there is a 2016 research paper which points out the role of Sargentomia sandflies also. So it is mainly sandflies which act as vector. Now mosquitoes have also been found to transmit the disease in laboratory conditions, like the Aedes aegypti mosquito, Aedes aegypti, which is for dengue disease. So it also acts as a vector, but it acts only under lab conditions. So in real conditions, normally it does not act as a carrier of this virus. So no isolation of the virus from mosquito has been reported as of then. So mainly it is the sandfly which acts as the vector for this Chandipura virus. Now what are the symptoms? It causes inflammation of the brain, that is encephalitis. So it causes inflammation of the brain. Now earlier outbreak of this disease had been in the year 2003 in children. It affects children, mostly less than 15 years of age. Now the symptoms include rapid onset of fever, then fever followed by vomiting, also change in the consciousness or mental status. Convulsions means shaking of the body due to contraction and relaxation, uncontrolled contraction and relaxation of the muscles. There is an uncontrolled shaking of body, and this is convulsions. Then diarrhea is also a symptom. Also neurological deficit, that is not able to speak, loss of balance and vision changes. Also meningeal irritation. Meninges are the membranes in the brain, and irritation of these membranes occurs which may cause headache. And also other symptoms include neck stiffness, photophobia, that is allergy to light, and seizures. So seizures means abnormal flow of electricity in the brain. Now, who are the vulnerable and whom does it affect? Mostly it is children less than 15 years of age. Predominantly it is in the rural locations. In 2003, the outbreak was in Andhra Pradesh, and children from 9 months of age to 14 years of age, they were affected, and deaths mostly occurs within 2 days of the hospital admission. So within 2 days, the death occurred. In the current outbreak in Gujarat, all the suspected deaths, they are of children. Now what is the treatment? There is no antiviral agent and no vaccine for the disease, and early diagnosis and treatment, they are the key. And a document by Gujarat government says that management of the disease, including managing the airways, the breathing and circulation through oxygen therapy, ventilation if required, management of fluid and electrolyte balance in the body, then management of hyperprexia. Hyperprexia is a condition in which the body temperature goes above 106.7 degree Fahrenheit. And management of raised intracranial pressure. So in this disease, the intracranial pressure. So cranial refers to the skull. So the pressure inside the skull, it increases, and managing this pressure through external interventions is required, and management of seizures which occur during the disease, that is also required. Also prevention of secondary bacterial infections is required. So these are the methods of managing the disease. Now prevention. It is always said that prevention is better than cure, and since there is no antiviral agent and no vaccine, prevention assumes all the more significance. So how to prevent this disease? One is identify the sandfly breeding sites. Now, where do the sandflies breed? They breed in the holes and crevices of the walls. So, in walls, in the crevices and the holes, these sandflies usually breed. And holes in the trees, there are also holes in trees. So, in the holes of trees, also these sandflies breed. Mostly in dark rooms, in the stables, in the storerooms. So, in closed spaces, dark spaces, holes, crevices, sandflies are found. So we need to identify these breeding sites. Then we have to spray insecticides. So spray insecticides in these breeding sites. Also sanitation is key. Environmental control, including proper storage and disposal of waste. Waste disposal should be proper. Open air defecation should be stopped. This is also a way of preventing the disease. Use of protective clothing, use of repellents for the insect, and use of nets. These are also important steps to prevent the disease. So in this lecture, we have studied about two important diseases of concern, that is the monkeypox, which has been declared a public health emergency of international concern by WHO, and the Chandipura virus. We have also studied about the concept of endemic, pandemic, and epidemic. And endemic is a disease which is usually found in a particular area. Epidemic is a disease which spreads unexpectedly in a particular region. Example of endemic may include sickle cell anemia in African region. Epidemic spreads unexpectedly all of a sudden in a particular region, and example may be the plague epidemic in Surat. Pandemic is a disease pandemic can be called an epidemic which crosses international boundaries, which spreads to a large number of countries and assumes a global nature. So that is pandemic, like the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we also studied about what is pandemic treaty, the concept of pandemic treaty, and about the agreements that had been reached in the World Health Assembly, which included the amendments to the International Health Regulations of 2005. So this was about the recent diseases of concern. Thank you.